Rain had been falling over the Ashworth estate since noon, a thin gray curtain over the hedges and the long gravel drive, and by the time evening came, the whole house smelled of whetstone and candle wax because the power had flickered twice already. Nora Whitfield had worked in that house for 6 years, long enough to know which floorboards creaked and which ones didn't, long enough to know that Mr. Daniel Ashworth took his coffee black and his silence seriously, and long enough to know that something about his fiancée, Vivian Cole, had never once felt warm. Nora kept that thought to herself the way she kept most things to herself, folded small and tucked away, because a maid who spoke her mind in a house like this didn't stay a maid for long. She had learned that lesson from her mother, who had cleaned houses in 3 different states and always said the same thing. "You are paid to see everything and say nothing." That evening, Vivian had asked her to stay late to help prepare for a small private dinner. Nothing unusual in itself, except that when the last car pulled away and the caterers left, Vivian didn't dismiss her. Instead, she led Nora down the back hallway past the pantry, toward the old servant's stairwell that hadn't been used in years, and Nora felt the first cold thread of unease settle into her stomach. The hallway lights buzzed faintly. Vivian's heels clicked against the tile in a rhythm that felt too deliberate, too rehearsed, and when she finally turned around at the bottom of the stairs, her smile didn't reach her eyes at all. "I need you to help me with something," Vivian said, and her voice had none of its usual dinner party sweetness. It was flat, businesslike, the voice of someone giving instructions to a subordinate, rather than asking a favor of a person. Nora asked what she needed, keeping her tone even, keeping her hands folded the way she always did, and Vivian told her they were going to the old wine cellar to check on a shipment. It wasn't true. Nora knew the wine cellar didn't need checking. Daniel had it inventoried every month by a service, and Vivian had never once shown interest in wine. But 6 years of practice had taught Nora not to argue with the people who signed her checks, so she followed. The cellar room at the far end of the estate had been converted years ago into a storage space half-finished, with exposed beams and a single hanging bulb that swayed slightly when the door opened. It was there that Nora understood too late that she had walked into something she couldn't walk back out of. 2 men were already waiting, men she didn't recognize, dressed like security but carrying themselves like something else entirely, something colder. Before she could speak, before she could even process what was happening, one of them had her wrists bound behind her back with a zip tie that bit into her skin, and a strip of tape sealed across her mouth so quickly that her protest came out as nothing more than a muffled sound swallowed by the empty room. Vivian watched all of it without flinching, arms crossed, her red dress catching the dim light like a warning. "You've seen too much," she said quietly, almost gently, as if she were explaining something reasonable. "The papers on Daniel's desk. The calls I've made. You clean this house, Nora. You're not supposed to remember any of it." Nora's mind raced backward, trying to understand what Vivian meant, and slowly, horribly, it came together. Weeks ago, she had dusted the study and noticed documents she hadn't understood at the time, references to shell accounts, to a name that wasn't Vivian's real one, to an inheritance dispute involving Daniel's late father's estate that had never been settled the way everyone believed. She hadn't thought much of it then. She thought of nothing else now. "You don't have to do this," Nora tried to say, though the tape swallowed the words into nothing but a broken hum. Vivian crouched slightly, studying her the way someone studies an inconvenience rather than a person, and reached up toward the exposed beam above them, where a length of rope already hung, looped and waiting, as though this had been planned for hours, maybe days. "Make it quick," Vivian said to the man nearest her, her voice dropping to something almost bored, the tone of someone finishing an errand. "I have a dinner to get back to." It was in that exact moment, with the rope swinging gently under the yellow bulb and Nora's heartbeat roaring in her own ears, that the cellar door opened behind them, and the temperature of the room seemed to drop all at once. Daniel Ashworth stood in the doorway in his dinner jacket, tie loosened, Rain still clinging to his shoulders from the walk across the courtyard, and for a moment nobody moved. Nora would remember later that his face didn't show shock first. It showed something quieter and far more dangerous, a stillness that settled over him like ice forming on a lake, silent and complete. His eyes moved from the rope to the 2 men, to Nora bound and gagged on the floor, and finally to Vivian. And when he spoke, his voice was low. Controlled, the kind of controlled That comes from a man who has spent a lifetime learning not to let people see what he's actually feeling. Say that again, he said to Vivian. Slowly, Vivian's composure cracked for just a second, a flicker of panic crossing her face before she smoothed it back into practiced calm. Daniel, this isn't what it looks like. She's been going through your things. She's been talking to people about the estate, about your father's will. I know what she's been doing, Daniel said, and something in his tone made both men holding Nora go still, unsure now of who they were actually working for. I asked her to. The room seemed to tilt. Vivian's mouth opened, closed. Nora's eyes, wide above the tape, searched Daniel's face for an explanation, and slowly, carefully, he crossed the room and knelt beside her, his hands steady as he peeled the tape away himself rather than letting anyone else touch her, and cut the zip tie with a small blade from his jacket pocket. I'm sorry, he said quietly, only to her. I should have told you sooner. I should have protected you better than this. Hey there, everyone! Today we're talking about how to keep love fresh. Firstly, plan some surprise events for your partner to heat up your relationship on memorable days. Being honest and open with your partner about your feelings is also important. Remember, love isn't just about feelings. It's also about actions. If you truly care for someone, you'll take the necessary steps to keep that love alive and vibrant. So here's a tip. Don't hesitate to express your feelings of affection toward your partner. They need to feel cherished too. Let's stay positive and keep love alive. In the days that followed, the police took statements. Vivian's assets were frozen pending investigation, and the truth of who she really was unraveled thread by thread in front of reporters who had, until then, only known her as the elegant fiancée of one of the city's most private billionaires. Nora gave her account calmly, the way she did most things, though her hands shook every time she spoke about the rope. Daniel sat beside her through every interview, every police visit, refusing to let her go through any of it alone, and something in the house shifted after that. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was simply quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm has finally passed. He offered her anything she wanted, a settlement, a new position somewhere far from what had happened, if she never wanted to see the estate again. Nora surprised herself by shaking her head. She didn't want to run from the house. She wanted to stop being invisible in it. And so, months later, when the story had faded from headlines and the estate had grown quiet, again in the way old houses do, Daniel didn't simply thank her and move on. He asked her to stay not as staff, but as someone he wanted in his life in a way he hadn't let himself consider before. Someone who had never once needed a title or a fortune to prove her worth, who had earned his trust by simply being decent when no one was watching. It wasn't dramatic the way it happened. There was no grand proposal in front of cameras, no press release, nothing like the life Vivian had tried to steal for herself. It was smaller than that, and steadier. Dinners in the kitchen instead of the formal dining room, conversations that lasted long after the food had gone cold, the particular kind of relief that comes from finally being seen by someone after years of being overlooked. Nora still cleaned the house some mornings, out of habit more than necessity, and Daniel never once tried to stop her, understanding that some things people do because it's who they are, not because they have to. The old cellar was renovated that spring, the exposed beam removed entirely, replaced with new wood and better light, and Daniel had a small brass plate installed near the door, plain and unassuming, the kind of thing only the two of them would ever understand the meaning of. It read simply, "For the ones who see everything and are finally seen back." Vivian's trial concluded quietly the following winter, her name reduced to